All right, hello again. So in this video, we're going to go over responsive web design principles and layout. You probably have seen some of these details and items in other places, depending on the order you see these in, but I thought I would do one video that kind of puts it all together a little bit and talks about the benefits and advantages and things like that. So what is responsive web design, or RWD? So basically, your design is going to respond to different scenarios, like different devices. Orientation, is it portrait, is it landscape? Mostly it's device width, but there are other things you can do as far as making a design responsive. We'll talk about the origins a little bit of responsive web design, look at a couple of examples. Right now we'll say that one of the advantages of a responsive design is you have one web page that works in different environments on different devices. Back in the day, a long time ago, before Fire was invented and things like that, you used to have sometimes multiple web pages, right? You'd have a mobile version and you'd have a desktop version, and that still happens now. But the idea behind responsive web design is the one page, the one HTML file, generally kind of adapts to its different scenarios. Is it on mobile? Is it on desktop? That kind of thing. The disadvantage to doing it that way is it is more complicated than a simple making one for desktop or making one for mobile or making a fixed layout, which isn't really done anymore, but or a simple liquid design. It's sort of a liquid design that's taken to the next level as far as adapting. We'll look at a couple of frameworks, which you probably maybe have heard of: Bootstrap, Foundation, some other ones. And then we'll do a little bit just to make a page a little bit more responsive as an example. And then we'll talk about as we're doing that, we'll talk about the main principles: the flexible grid, responsive layout, which allows a responsive layout, media queries, which you've probably seen before, which involve breakpoints, and responsive images. So kind of a lot of stuff. So here's what we are going to make. We are going to have this design here, which has sort of this main content area and a sidebar. It's got an image in there. As we resize, which is typical of responsive, it's going to go from a higher number of columns to a lower number of columns, fewer columns, right? So here we have 3 columns. This area has 2, and then we get to a certain breakpoint, if I can do it, and we get 2 columns. This column is now, or these 2 columns are now combined into one. You still have this guy over here, and then if we keep going, it goes to 1 column. You always want to make sure you look at your designs, any kind of design, responsive design or otherwise, in the developer tools, and then you have this button here. This works in Chrome or Firefox. Some people like Firefox a little bit better because you can see some of the information a little bit more clearly. But anyway, if I click this little button right here, then I get a mobile device look, right? And I can adjust which type of device I'm looking at. Right now I'm looking at an iPhone 12 Pro, which is kind of old at this point, but and now you can see it's 1 column. So typically that's going to be a tendency of responsive design is to go from 1 column in the mobile to multiple columns in the desktop. So this page that we're working on also talks about the basis or the principles of responsive web design, which are a fluid grid, some sort of grid that resizes along with the browser window or the device size. Flexible images, responsive images that adjust to. You can see this image over here is adjusting in size, right? So it doesn't leak out of the design, that kind of thing. Media queries, which are a way to make sort of if-then statements for code to make it work at certain sizes and not work at other sizes, so that you can change that look depending on the circumstances. That's not the only way to do responsive design, media queries. There's lots of other ways now. You can do responsive web design without media queries or sometimes without media queries, but it's still pretty common to see media queries. And then, like I said, responsive layouts is our goal, right? So that's what we're gonna do. Let's look at a couple of examples real quick. So this is Boston Globe. You may have seen this one before. As we look down here, you've got a lot of columns, right? And physiologically, it's easier for us to read when it's like 3 to 5 inches wide, a column. If it was a full width like this, all one line of text, it would be difficult to read because it would be hard to find the next line, right? So we want to go from something like this, and then as we get smaller on a smaller divide, well, we have columns, right? We have a number of columns here. As we get smaller, you can see the images are resizing, they're getting smaller. And then we'll see the actual number of columns change. So now we're down to kind of two columns. And then if we keep going, it goes to 1, which is very typical of responsive design patterns. That's one example. Here's another one. This is Apple. And if I start out wide here, it looks like this, right? If I start to get smaller, you'll see that the typography changed size, which is one aspect of responsive design. This image got smaller. And then there's even some art direction on this. People usually refer to this as art direction. When I get to this certain size, well, one thing you see that happens first is this navigation bar goes from a horizontal navigation bar to a, oops, I clicked on something. Here we go. It goes to a mobile-friendly navigation design with this navigation icon, sort of a hamburger with no meat. I guess it's a vegan burger, right? And if I click on that, then you see the navigation. So that's so that it fits on a mobile screen. And then if I keep going, you'll see the art direction part that I mentioned, where this image actually changes to a different image that fits better on mobile. So that's a pretty good example of some mobile design aspects with images. The origins of RWD, or responsive web design. This is the article that supposedly kind of started it all. This is by Ethan Marcotte. This is from May 2010, so back before Tesla was a thing. And so he kind of, I think he may have coined the term, but this is the article that kind of got it going a little bit, that idea of responsive web design. So it hasn't been around that awful long, but it is kind of the standard now. This is a book by Ethan Marcotte from A Book Apart, which are short little fun, well, I guess they're fun to some people, books about web design and development. So there's a book about that. I think it's in second edition at this point when you see this. There's another book here. This is by Luke Wroblewski, I think that's how you say it, called Mobile First. So that's another sort of responsive web design related term. Basically what mobile first means, and if I go over here too, I have a little bit about mobile first. What mobile first means is you should be designing for mobile before you're designing for desktop. When responsive design first started, we had mostly desktop oriented designs, right? 2007 was when the iPhone came out, and before that people were designing basically for desktop because it wasn't practical to look at websites on a phone at all before. Well, not much anyway, before 2010. Or you had separate websites, let's put it that way, mobile websites. So as you can see, like the share of mobile website traffic has just continued to grow and grow and grow, and it's over half, right? So chances are now, if somebody's looking at your website, it's gonna be on mobile. It's not gonna be on a desktop. Now they may go on the desktop to actually get things done, which happens a lot, right? You open it on your phone, you're like, I gotta do a bunch of stuff here, type in some stuff or whatever you're gonna do, buy a new house, whatever, and you're going to go on the desktop maybe to do that kind of thing. But many more people have a smartphone now that have a desktop computer. You probably knew that instinctively. But that's the idea behind mobile first, is design for mobile, and then add on or progressively enhance, you may hear a lot of terms like that, your desktop design so that it works better on, or it uses the space more on desktop. So that is mobile first, and this is a book. I lost it here. This is a book about it. It's a little bit older now, but probably still a pretty good read. Although it says it's sold out, paperback, but you could still buy a different version, a digital version. I threw this in here. Can I Use? I hope that you have all seen this before, but Can I Use is a good site to go to check if you can use the newest features related to responsive web design or anything else. But if you look at most search features, you'll see two of them are Flexbox and CSS Grid, which are used a lot for responsive design, and we use them a lot in the classes, right? So, but you can always go to Can I Use to see the support for these technologies and others, because you'll always see new things added to CSS, especially all the time, and you need to know if they're going to work in everybody's browser. This is an older article too from 2012 from Luke Wroblewski. I have a tough time saying that. About multi-device layout patterns, like how do people make responsive designs? So You'll see he named a few of these back in the day, mostly fluid or column drop. These are kind of probably the way responsive design usually works in a modern day. You have a desktop view that has some containers, right? And as you get more narrow, the containers start to drop down the page, just like we saw in the Boston Globe site. So that's kind of the way it typically works. I wanted to show you a couple of CSS frameworks that use responsive design. This is Bootstrap, which you may have seen already in a class or a video about it, but Bootstrap is a very popular CSS library and JavaScript library and framework that you can use to make sites pretty quickly. And you see it says build fast responsive sites. So everything's about responsive. Here's another one. This is Foundation. You see they mention responsive right away here. So that's another very popular framework used to make websites, and they're going to be responsive. I think that's about it. I did want to mention too that another reason that sites should be responsive is a few years ago. I think that might be in the text on the page actually. Google announced Mobilegeddon. Somebody called it Mobilegeddon. That's pretty funny. And started to boost page rankings for mobile-friendly sites, and then downgrading the page rankings of sites that weren't mobile-friendly. So what that means is if your site was not or is not mobile-friendly, Google will not rank it as highly as others, theoretically. Google will never tell you, often won't tell you how they rank pages because people like to game that system for search engine optimization, but it is very important, obviously. So that's what we're doing. So let me get this out of the way here and get this guy out of here. And then get this guy out of here too. And we're going to start with this page here. So we're just going to do a little bit of this. It won't take too long. I kind of pre-baked this thing mostly for you. So if you look in this, the files here that I have given you guys, there is just this image here, HTML5 sticker. It's very large and it is not responsive yet because it's just a large image. It's not a large file size, but it's a large dimensions wise. We have a start file here, and then there's a normalized file here, which is one of many different kinds of normalized files. That's to make the pages look the same on different browsers. So let's take a look at this guy here. It's that page that we saw before, but it's not mobile friendly yet. So here it is here, and I'm going to close this guy up here. There we go. Okay, so I'll make this a little bigger. I think that's about as big as I can get without making it giant. Okay, so if we look at this page right now, if I right click and go to inspect, like you want to do, and check it in a mobile view here, you can see that looks messed up. So that's telling me that I'm probably missing the viewport responsive tag. That's why this is scaling this down. So your mobile devices have a very high resolution, higher than your desktop monitor usually or often. So if you don't use the mobile mobile viewport tag, the browser is just going to scale the whole page down so it fits. And then you have to use pinch and zoom to see things, and it's pretty bad. A bad experience, very bad experience. So also you can see that image is way too big. It's kind of leaking out. That's why we're seeing it over here on the side. So yeah, so let's go ahead and get started. This is the way it looks right now. I'm going to put this back to a normal view. It is in a single column though, which is where we want to stay for mobile. So that's what I meant by mobile first. So we don't really want to change that part, but we do need to change some other things, obviously, to make it work on desktop, make the images responsive, things like that. So if I go back to the top, there's the mobile viewport tag right there. You've all seen this, hopefully, by this point, but if you haven't, this is what's going to scale that page. So it's going to tell the browser or the mobile device to act as if it is a lower resolution device, basically. And so it won't scale that page down. It'll look normal sized, if we put it that way. So I'm just going to uncomment this. I'm not going to make you type this. If you're in VS Code and you start a new page and you use the exclamation mark shortcut, which you all should probably be familiar with, it will put this code in here for you, so you don't have to type this. You shouldn't have to anyway. Or if you start with a page and do a save as, you shouldn't have to type this anyway, because this should pretty much be on every page. So I'm just going to uncomment this guy by moving this comment tag over here, and now that is in effect. It's not going to be, it's not going to fix that image, but it's going to fix the zooming of the page. So to fix that image, let's go down here. Here's that image right here. It's obviously way too big. I call it leaking out of the container there. You can just add a little bit of code, which you have probably seen before, like I said, but I don't know which order you're seeing this in. We're going to go down here in where it says add here on about line 92. I should have put add code here, but you get the idea. And I'm going to style all the images. So I'm going to do this as a HTML element selector, IMG. And then I put my curly braces, and I'm just going to say max width 100%. And you see it's already fixed over there. I just pointed with my finger. You guys can't see that, but I pointed with my finger. Max width 100% and a height of auto, just to make sure that the aspect ratio doesn't get messed up as far as squished or something like that. So now we can see that's already some responsive design right there. If I resize this browser window, that image resizes with it. So what we're saying there is the maximum width of that image is the width of the container that it's in. That's 100%, right? Sometimes you'll see people use width. That will scale the image past its actual size. So some people don't like to use that because it can affect the quality of the image. Max width means it'll stop when it gets to its actual size. So you want to use an image that is bigger than you would ever need, I guess, if you want to put it that way. Now, if we look at this page again, if I inspect it one more time and put the mobile view in, look at that. It's already mobile first. So it's one column, right? It goes down. We can scroll down. That image now fits. The text is a normal size. That's all fixed by those two little items. So now our mobile design is kind of done. I mean, it might not be the best design in the world, but it is usable and works. And yeah, so that's good. All right, let's go ahead and move down. I'm going to get out of the mobile view because we're going to work on the desktop view now. Let's move down to the media queries, which I just lost. Right about here. So it says first grid breakpoint. So breakpoints, again, are where you want your design to change. That's called the breakpoint. And they're usually set by width. They don't have to be. There's all kinds of breakpoints you can put in. But this one says, and I've already kind of started this one for you because I didn't want to have you guys have to type this one time. But we'll type it in another version down here. But so what this means is we are saying at media screen and min width 768. What does that mean? That means this is the media is screen, which means we're looking at it on a screen. You can also do print, and there's a lot of other media as well. So we want this to happen if we're on a screen and the minimum width is 768, which is, and you can actually say this different ways now, but this is how you usually see it. This means anything above 768. So these styles in between this yellow curly brace and this one are not going to work unless our minimum width is 768, which basically means 769, I guess. So it's kind of like, that's what I meant. It's kind of like an if-then statement. If these things are true, we're on a screen and our width is at least 768, then everything between these yellow curly braces or braces is going to happen. So that's kind of how the media queries work, at least in this case. So what I wanted to do was just show you how you can change styles and things when that criteria is met as far as that width goes. So we're actually going to add a little bit of text shadow as just something to show you that on a desktop we could add a little text shadow to this, and on mobile we're not going to have a text shadow because maybe that would hurt readability. So that's the kind of considerations you have to take or should take, right? Is what's going to hurt readability at certain sizes, things like that. So it already has a font size of 5 REM and a padding of 1. And if you see this, right, I don't know if you guys saw this, but the size of that text changes. So when we get below 768, that font goes to, or is the default size, which is farther up there. And as we get above 768, the size of the text gets bigger to use the space a little bit better. And I changed the padding too. I kind of pre-made all this, obviously, and worked out what the settings would be. But if I comment this out, I'll just hit comment that out. Now you can see that it's a small text and it doesn't change size, right? Okay, so let me put that back. All right, let's add one more line here. We're just gonna add a text shadow. Let's go to the next line here and we'll say text shadow. And And let's go 2 pixels, 2 pixels, 2 pixels. That's kind of redundant, huh? RGBA, so I like to do it with RGBA. And then let's do black, 0, 0, 0, comma, and we'll do 0.8. So now you can see that has, I don't know if you guys can see that, you can see it on your own. Now it has a little bit of a text shadow underneath that text, just to make it look a little more cool, I guess, right? But if we get down below that 768 size again, that text shadow goes away. So theoretically, then maybe that would help with readability a little bit. That's kind of an example that I'm thinking of for you guys. All right, so that's that one. I didn't really show you the structure of this page, which I probably should, so you know what we're going to do next, because now we're going to work with these containers. So if I look down here, I've got a wrapper, I've got a header, I've got a content area, which is this whole center area. And then I've got an article. That is the gray area. And then if I move down, it's got a couple of columns in it as well. A couple of divs in there. I could have used section actually instead of these divs with sections in them. I could have just used a section, but hopefully you get that. That one does have a section. 2 sections in there. And then if I scroll down, sorry about the scrolling, way down here there is the, where is it? The aside. So the aside is the sidebar. That's the white part, which right now is at the bottom, this part down here. So we're going to make columns out of those. So you've got content with an article and an aside in it, basically. Probably could have just said that instead of with all the scrolling. All right, so I'm going to go back up here to about line 109. It might be slightly different now for you. And I'm going to style the content area. So that's pound content. So that is an ID, right? If it has a pound or the hash on it, right? And I'm going to say display grid. And whether you've seen grid or not before, I'm going to pretend that you haven't, but I'm not going to explain it that well. But in this short video here, or the short coding part of this video anyway, grid is used, CSS grid is commonly used for some responsive design and make columns and to put things where you want in a grid, right? So I'm going to say display grid, which nothing actually happens until we make some columns or do something like that. So I'm going to say grid template columns. And I'm just typing a couple of letters in this. We're in VS Code, or I'm in VS Code, right? I just typed a couple of letters and I saw grid template columns. And then I use my arrow keys because I'm lazy, right? Or smart and lazy. And to get to grid template columns and hit return. And now that's in there, right? So now we're going to say how wide we want our columns are. So I'm going to say 66%. And this can be done a million different ways, different units and things, but I'm going to keep it simple and use percent for this this one. And now you can see we've got that content area has been divided into 2 columns. One column is 66% of the width of the container, and one is 34. That adds up to 100. And there we go. So now this content has this area and this area. So we've got 2 columns already from 2 lines, well, 4 lines, I guess. Could be 1 line, depending on how you typed it. But yeah, so we've got some a little bit of responsive design here. And as we go below that 768 mark again, what's going to happen? It goes back to our mobile first, or our single column design. So you've probably seen this before, but like I said, depending on when you see this video. All right, so we want this the article to span a couple of grid columns or grid lines. So I'm going to put article in here. And that's this area. And it is going to span from 1 to 2. Sorry, I left out the main part here. I'm going to say grid column. Grid column 1/2, which means it's going to go across, and I spelled column wrong. It's going to go across. See if I roll over this, you'll see this, I think here. Did I spell it wrong? I did. There we go. Grid column. So grid column means that it's going to span across those 2 grid lines. I wanted to show you the grid lines. That's what I wanted to do. If I right click here and I go to inspect, and then I'm going to go to layout, and I will click on this grid overlays here. This really helps a lot. I'm going to click on grid overlay, and you can see the grid lines, right, for the CSS grid. So here's the number 1 and here's the number 2. I probably didn't even really need that, but it might come into play later. But this is I'm telling it that I want the content area to go from this grid line, which is the first one, to the second. And then this is the third one here. So we're kind of specifying where the article is going to go. And it already was there. Whoops, I just put that in the wrong place too. It kind of already was there, but I put that in anyway. And okay, so I think that's good. And now we're going to say where we want the aside to go. We're going to say aside, and we're going to say grid column. This time I'll type it correctly. And 2/3. That's saying that we want that to go. Let me put the lines up again. There they are. So now this article goes from 1 to 2, and then this one goes from 2 to 3. It was already kind of doing that. I could probably turn this off, but I wanted to kind of show you that because we're going to do a different breakpoint on the second part, so that may affect that. So let's go back down here, and we're going to do our second grid breakpoint. So right now, it just goes from 1 column to 2, right? We want to break this into 2 columns when we get to a different breakpoint. This time I'm going to have you put in the whole thing just to get a tiny bit of practice with that. So we're going to go at media, screen, and then make sure you put a space there. Sometimes people forget a space. So at media screen, and we're going to do min width of I think I'm gonna do 1100, and it's good idea to kind of let your content sort of determine where your breakpoints are if you can. You will see some standardized breakpoints, especially in some of the CSS frameworks like Bootstrap and things. They have built-in breakpoints, but you can put your own in if you think it works better that way. All right, so you've got at media screen and min width 1100 pixels. And again, that means this is going to work only when it's a screen, which is what we're looking at, and it's at least 1100 pixels wide. So now we're going to break the article into a grid of its own. So it's kind of a grid within a grid. So I'm going to say article, if I could spell article. And we're going to say display grid here. Display grid, all right. And then again, it's not going to do anything until I make some columns. So I'm going to say grid template columns. And this time I'm going to split it in half. So I'm going to put 50% and 50%, which means 2 columns that are each 50% wide. I could have put 1 FR and 1 FR. That would also work. But I did it with percentages. So let's see if that, well, let's finish this and then we'll see if everything's working right. You always got to see if it's working right. Well, let's actually look. I want to make sure it's working. Yeah, okay. So here's a little issue that we need to fix right now. So what happens when you do a CSS grid is every block element becomes a grid item or an item in the grid. So what's happening is this heading level 2, it's becoming its own grid item, and then this is becoming a grid item, and then this is becoming a grid item. So it's going 1, 2, 3. There's 3 grid items in there. So obviously that doesn't work. They're all 50%. It's trying to do it, but it's not really doing what we want. So we need to tell the browser that this heading that's out by itself needs to go across 2 grid lines, or 2 grid tracks, actually. These are called tracks, the vertical tracks. And yeah, you'll see other videos about CSS grid, so I'm not going to worry about that too much. So I'm going to say h2 here, dot full width. That is the name of this heading here has a full width class on it. So I'm going to say h2 full underscore width. Probably could have named that a little more conveniently, but. And then I'm going to do grid column again. And we're going to do 1/3, which means it's going to go from grid line 1 to grid line 3. Let's see if it's working, if I typed it right. Aha, it works. So if I show those grid lines again, and I'll actually, over here, I'm going to show you on the mobile, in the device tools, I can show the grid overlays on the main grid here, this div content one, and on the article, since I put a grid on that as well. They're different colors even. Oh, that's pretty. Picked yellow and green. So here is this guy here is going from 1 to 3 across these two here, and these are going from 1 to 2 and 2 to 3, or 1 to 3 basically, or 1 to 2, sorry, when it goes across. So everything is working. We said we wanted this one to basically span across these two grid containers, and then these are doing one container. And hopefully that makes a little bit of sense. But if I resize here, I still got those. I'm going to turn off those guys here. And you see the one grid goes away when I get below 1100. So now it's only showing me 1 because I don't have the second grid because I'm not above 1100. Now I do. But now we're going from 1 column to 2 columns to 3 columns, basically. And I do want to see that in the mobile view to make sure everything is still working correctly. And it looks the same as it did before because we haven't hit those breakpoints, right? When we're in this mobile view. Okay, I think that is it for this one. So hopefully that helped a little bit, just to get some background on responsive design and like some examples and things like that, and a little bit of an example as far as how to do a little bit of responsive design. But I think that's it, and I will talk to you again later.